Stephen, thanks for the introduction. I have to start off by admitting that this is a little bit outside my comfort zone. Those of you who know me more as a military historian with a particular interest in Ireland and the Great War. But today I'm going to speak on, for the next 40 minutes or so, on some of the wider topics and wider aspects of Ireland in 1917, such as the politics, economics and social issues, and if time permits, perhaps a little of the military situation as it relates to Ireland and the home front. Any consideration of Ireland in 1917 cannot escape the shadow of the events of 1916, and in particular the Easter Rising and the Western Front, where both the 36th Ulster Division and the 16th Irish Division participated in the Battle of the Somme, suffering serious casualties which would prove difficult to replace. Let's begin by considering the aftermath of the Easter Rising. As a military operation, I think we would all admit that it was a failure, which in the short term at least had resulted in the suppression of Irish separatist organisations. Even its political legacy is difficult to identify and is unclear, as none of the bodies actually involved were political parties as such. Those involved being the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the IRB, the Irish Volunteers, and the Citizens' Army, Conley Citizens' Army. None of them were political parties. And apart from the rhetoric of the independence proclamation, Pearse, Conley and Clark all had different political visions of what an independent Ireland would look like. As Fergal McGarry from Queen's University has noted, the Rising was as much against Redmond and Irish Home Rule, and also against the Irish Parliamentary Party as it was against the British. As a result, no political party was able to claim the legacy of the Rising, least of all Sinn Féin, who under its founder Arthur Griffiths. There we go. This is Dublin after the Rising. It should be said at this point, actually, part of the big discussion really towards the end of 1916 and 1917 was who was going to pay for the damage. Something that we're not unaware of here. Arthur Griffin, the founder of Sinn Féin, had neither participated in nor had he supported the rebellion. The fact that the Rising has erroneously been referred to as the British as Sinn Féin Rising or the Sinn Féin Rebellion helped to elevate a very small, relatively unknown party to previously unknown heights of popularity. And given the public revulsion at the executions, gave political moderates like Arthur Griffith an opportunity to exploit their newfound fame for their peaceable pretensions. At this stage, Griffin was very much while for an independent Ireland, he talked about a dual monarchy, and maybe we'll come back and explain that one later. At the time, of course, it was difficult to understand where a peaceful organisation such as Sinn Féin was going to take in the more radical Republicans who had taken part in the rebellion. So that wasn't clear at the time. The Rising had, however, resulted in a hardening of British attitudes and policy in Ireland from the relatively benign attitudes and governance of Augustine Birrell, the Chief Secretary for Ireland, to the heavy-handed military governance of Major General Sir John Maxwell. Birrell's outlook tended to be, let's wait and see, because he was really just waiting for the Home Rule Act to come in and didn't want to rock the boat. But of course, Maxwell had been given a different briefing after the rebellion, and had been given full authority to quell any rising and punish the rebels to ensure that any spark of resistance to British rule was quenched, and hence martial law was brought in. While at first the rising had been widely condemned in the press by the Catholic Church and among constitutional nationalists, Maxwell's handling of its aftermath soon provoked widespread support for the rebels, even among the leaders of the Irish Parliamentary Party, who had no reason to sympathise with the rebels at all. Maxwell's response in executing the rebel leaders and the arrest of over 3,500 nationalists in the wake of the rebellion, against the advice, should be said, of his predecessor, may in hindsight be viewed as being at the very least inept. However, in the context of what was going on at the time, it cannot be viewed as disproportionate. After all, the British Army executed 28 Irish soldiers for much less offences, and while the rebels, gallant allies, the Germans, had executed far more when they burned the city of Leuven to the ground in the belief that its soldiers had been fired upon. I think it's generally believed these days that actually they hadn't been fired upon. It might well have been one of their own guns going off, but it resulted in the town being burned to the ground and hundreds of people being executed. In addition to those executed, as I've said, 3,500 plus were arrested, of which 1,424 were released within a fortnight, and all but 579 were subsequently released as posing no danger to the state, which shows the lack of military intelligence at the time. It's very much like the Casablanca film, to round up the usual suspects at this stage. Nevertheless, Maxwell's heavy-handedness galvanised public opinion in support of the rebels, even among those who were unsympathetic to their aims. The Bishop of Limerick denounced the response to the rising as wantonly cruel and oppressive, but an Irish Party MP of Westminster, showing a poor grasp of history in general, and more particularly in Irish history, declared that no rebellion had ever been put down with so much blood and so much savagery as the recent insurrection in Ireland. Must have forgotten about 1798. This response was exactly what the rebel leaders had hoped for. As Sean McDermott had remarked to a fellow volunteer after surrendering on the 28th of April 1916, the cause is lost if some of us are not shot. Only a much more rapid reassertion of political authority after the rising could have mitigated its impact. But it is clear that those who might have imposed such limits did not see any need to do so. They were, after all, members of the British government, and no doubt represented the general opinion of the British at the time. 1917. As the war entered 1917, there was a great degree of optimism in the air. The Cork Examiner, in its editorial on New Year's Day, stated that no 1917 will see the war continued. Still, there is every reason to look forward with increasing hope. Right will triumph over might, and the year now entered into, one may hope, go down in history as the period during which civilization and humanity triumphed over greed and barbarism. It's hope we're not just confined to the war and foreign Irish settlement, and where it was no less optimistic. Recording for Ireland too, the prospects are healthy, and with the coming of the Imperial Conference, it should not be too much to hope that the long-deferred aspirations of Irishmen for freedom will be satisfactorily realised. John Dillon, who had replaced the ailing John Redmond at the head of the Irish Party, however, adopted a more aggressive approach in Parliament and used every opportunity presented by events in the war to raise further the cause of Irish independence, or Irish Home Rule. In a speech at Swinford in County Mayo in January 17, he expressed the view that the Irish situation had become not just an internal issue for the British, but an international one, affecting its relationship not only with the Dominions, but also with the United States. This belief came on the back of a statement by the German government, issued in Amsterdam on the 13th of January, in which it accused Britain of double standards in its demands that peace was impossible so long as the restoration of the violated rights and liberties, the acknowledgement of the principles of nationality and free existence of small states were not guaranteed. The German reply went on to condemn the four Allied powers for not allowing these demands within their own sort of bailiwick. It recalls the fate of the Irish people, the destruction of freedom and independence of the Boer republics, the subjection of Northern Africa by England, France and Italy, the suppression of foreign nationalities of Russia, and finally the oppression of Greece, which is unexampled in history. They of course left out their behaviour in their own colonies. The hypocrisy, of course, of the House of Commons' support for the establishment of a provisional government in Russia was not lost on the Irish press. On the 23rd of March, the Cork Examiner suggested that British ministers would be more usefully employed in doing justice to the small nation at its doorstep than in paying compliments to the Russian people, who would probably regard Great Britain's fine phrases as being of more value if Great Britain herself lived up to the principles she advocated and rendered to Ireland the justice of her, that is her right. Lenin, however, put it slightly differently. He viewed it differently. He said the misfortune of Ireland, of the Irish, was that they rose too soon before the revolt of the European proletariat had matured. The problem with this assumption is that it presupposes a popular desire for socialist revolt in Ireland, while the real thrust of Irish politics at the time was dominated by looking to the past, very much a nation once again, rather than looking forward to a socialist future. Even James Connolly had sought to soothe fears that an Irish Republic would simply mean, fears of socialism, with the claim in his pamphlet, The Reconquest of Ireland, that as an Irish Republic would simply mean a return to the Gaelic system of landholding, except now that the government, rather than the chieftain, would hold land in the name of the entire community. On the 6th of December 1916, Lloyd George had ousted Asquith as Prime Minister, with the aid, it should be said, of Carson and Bonner Law, and formed a new coalition government with a larger unionist representation. When Redmond conferred with him 3 days later and demanded suspension of martial law in Ireland and the release of the untried prisoners, Lloyd George told him that he had no intention presently of making any more move for the settlement of the Irish question. The government, however, announced an amnesty of Irish internees in Christmas, who returned as a hardened group of separatists to radicalise Irish politics. It should be pointed out actually that early in 1917 there was another roundup under the auspices of Lieutenant General Sir Brian Mahon, an Irish general who commanded the 10th Irish Division in Gallipoli. And I think it had a strange outcome in that a lot of the people weren't actually put in prison. They were just taken to the mainland and told that they could live wherever they liked, as long as it wasn't in Ireland. The amnesty helped to further raise the population, the popularity of the growing political Sinn Féin movement, who were not directly involved in the rising. In the early months of 1917, negotiations for an Irish settlement went on behind the scenes. Momentum continued to build sharply for a new approach after America's entry into the war on the 17th of April 1917, when Lord George faced increasing pressure to settle the Irish question in deference to Irish-American sentiment, which had been isolationist as well as which had been isolationist so far in the war. The Irish Americans had provided much of the funding for the Easter Rising, but America's entrance into the war proved a bit of a two-edged sword for Irish nationalists, both at home and in the States. President Wilson understood that the Irish Americans were loyal supporters of the Democratic Party, but he viewed the situation in Ireland as an internal matter to be resolved by the government of the United Kingdom. If you remember, in this 14-point plan for resolving the war, Ireland was not mentioned as one of those small nations that deserved independence. During the war years, some Irish American figures had openly agitated against Britain. Irish nationalist John Devoy even helped to organise a massive Irish-German rally at Madison Square Gardens in June 1915. According to Terry Galloway, Devoy's biographer, for the revolutionaries of Irish America, war in Europe in 1914 posed none of the moral imperatives of the Second World War. Adding that many Irish nationalists in the US believed Ireland's liberty would best be served by a German victory. So once the US entered the war in 1917, the authorities began questioning the loyalties of Irish Americans. Irish publications were censored, banned or shut down, while key Irish nationalists were indicted on charges of conspiracy or espionage, particularly after the arson affair of 1917. For those who are unfamiliar with it, that's when a group of Indian nationals, members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and the German Foreign Office, attempted to ship guns from America to India in the hope of a rising there. Evidence that the domination of the Irish Parliamentary Party was under threat came in February 1917, when the Sinn Féin candidate, Count George Noble Plunkett, the father Joseph Plunkett, who had been executed for his role in the Easter Rising, was elected as Member of Parliament for North Roscommon on the death of the sitting Irish Parliamentary MP. This and Sinn Féin's victory in South Longford marked a radical shift in the Irish political landscape. Just 5 days after Sinn Féin's narrow victory in the South Longford by-election, Lord George, in a letter of 16th of May, offered Redmond, William O'Brien and Edward Carson the enactment of Home Rule for the 26 southern counties, or alternatively offered as a last resort a convention of Irishmen of all parties for the purpose of producing a scheme of Irish self-government. I suppose of these three men, the one in the middle is probably the least well known. That's William O'Brien, who was leader of the All for Ireland party at the time. Redmond replied, John Redmond here at the end here, replied, turning down the proposal, but agreeing to a conference. Home Rule could be in a sense given to him now, but of course he was wary of the fact that if he accepted that Ulster would be permanently excluded. He also felt that the eventual area that would be excluded with the conference could actually be narrowed down to fewer than 6 counties being proposed. It was a difficult choice for Redmond. He might have seized and exercised power in 26 counties to the advantage of the Home Rule cause, and might well have provided the freedom to achieve the freedom. His choice of a conference, all going well, could possibly secure the future of constitutional nationalism and halt the progress of a separatist movement. In a speech on the 21st of May, Lloyd George announced that the government had decided to invite Irishmen to put forward their own proposals for the government of their country. It was directed to a convention which was to consist not merely of political parties, but to be a real representation of Irish life and activity in all their leading branches. Furthermore, he pledged that if substantial agreement could be reached as to the character and scope of the constitution for a future government of Ireland within the Empire, the government would accept responsibility for taking all of the necessary steps to enable the Imperial Parliament to get the legislation effect at the conclusion of the convention. He added that Ireland should now try her own hand at hammering out an instrument of government for her own people. Following pressure from the Irish Parliamentary Party, Bonner Law announced an amnesty on the 15th of June when all the remaining 120 prisoners sentenced for involvement in the Easter Rising were released. In his words, so that the convention might meet in an atmosphere of harmony and goodwill. Among those released were Eamon Miller, Owen McNeil and Constance Markowitz. For Ulster Unionists, the Irish Convention posed no less a problem. Ulster Unionists argued if they boycotted it, nationalist rights would produce a home rule scheme acceptable to England, with Britain insisting on Ulster's acceptance. With the recent South Longford victory of Sinn Féin, they feared that they might be asked to accept an Irish Republic. They even regarded the 26 county Irish Parliament, coupled with the rise of Sinn Féin, as a greater risk to the realm than Home Rule originally would have been. Edward Carson, the Ulster leader, saw these anxieties less dramatically, however, and pointed out that since 1914, the Act could not be replaced, could not be repealed. Ulster representatives to the convention would need, and he set out a number of criteria to secure a position for Ulster which should be compatible with the principles for which the party stood, and to secure the acceptance by other parties of an ample safeguard as possible for the Unionist minority under the Irish Parliament. Quite a move, really, in many ways, away from sort of being outside an Irish Parliament. There seems here to be a certain degree that it was still open at this time. On June the 8th, 350 delegates to the Ulster Unionist Conference approved participation, subject to the stipulation, nothing in any way binding be accepted without first consulting the people of Ulster. The options for the Southern Unionists were more limited. Before entering the convention, Lord Middleton, their leader, had an overarching objective to avoid partition, which would leave Southern Unionists minority in a Catholic state. Two of the invited parties were prominent by their absence. Sinn Féin declined to the allocated 5 seats on the grounds that the terms of the reference of the convention provided that Ireland must be within the Empire, which entailed maintaining the supremacy of the British Parliament, therefore declined to attend. It, however, set out a number of points which would enable them to attend. One, the terms of reference left it free to decide on the complete independence of Ireland. The English government publicly pledged itself to the United States and the powers of Europe to ratify the decision of the majority of the convention, and that the convention consisted of none but persons freely elected under total adult suffrage in Ireland. Sinn Féin's absence allowed them to mobilise support for the more militant agenda among the Irish electorate. at the expense of the Irish Parliamentary Party. The government tried to remedy this by bringing in people who, although not supporters of Sinn Féin and not members, at least were willing to present their thoughts. William O'Brien of the All Ireland Party refused to take up his 2 seats, as did the Dublin Trades Council, the Cork Trade and Labour Council, and the Gaelic and National League. The opening of the convention was preceded by 2 by-elections, one on the 6th of July, when the Irish Party candidate was returned unopposed to Dublin South, and 4 days later in East Clare by-election, which had resulted from the death of Willie Redmond, the brother of the IPP leader, John Redmond, on the Western Front. Tim, no doubt, will give reference to that tomorrow. Eamon Neville won the seat by 5,010 to 2,035 votes. The first conference meeting, it's not very good photograph, I'm afraid. The first conference meeting was held on the 25th of July at Trinity College, Dublin. Delegates came from a broad cross-section of the Irish public, 52 representing nationalist interests. In addition, 9 were Southern Unionists, 24 Ulster Unionists, 32 delegates were chairmen of county councils, 8 chairmen of urban district councils, 53 were Catholic, 42 Protestant, but 9/10 of the representations were members of the Irish Party or the Ulster Unionist Party. 3 main groupings soon became apparent. The Nationalists led by Redmond with the Catholic bishops and representatives from the local government bodies. A second group, the Ulster Unionists, with H.T. Barry as their chairman, and a third group, the Southern Unionists under Lord Middleton. From the beginning, divisions within the convention became exposed. The need for some measure of local control over Ulster affairs to be offered to the Ulstermen had been resisted from the outset by the Catholic bishops. A proposal made during the presentation stage, a scheme modelled on the federal system of Switzerland, presented by Lord Londonderry, was equally rejected by the bishops. The fundamental cause for alarm for the Dublin bishops was the danger of a Protestant-dominated Ulster administration, even in the case where Ulster had a measure of autonomy in an all-Ireland settlement. Bishop O'Donnell, who was the Bishop of Raphoe, proposed a plan for Ulster Unionists of an additional 12 nominated representatives in an Irish Parliament and a further 12 for Southern Unionists to last for 10 years. The bishops, however, held firmly to the need for full fiscal control by an Irish Parliament, which was not surprising, given that before the war, which was not surprisingly rejected by the Ulster Unionists. Prior to the war, the government had issued a paper, and there had been some economic writings on the fact showing that the government expenditure and Irish taxation, less than 90% of taxation was covering the expenditure of the government in Ireland. This was mostly due to the introduction of the old age pension in 1909, where we had the strange situation where Ireland made up 10% of the population, but took up 20% of the pensions. So it was a heavy burden. So already before 1914, the Irish Independence Party already knew that there was going to be a shortfall in any income. Recognising, also of that income, a disproportionate portion of it was being paid by the northern counties because of their industrialisation. Recognising that Irish industrial output was unevenly distributed and the tax burden, the economic pre-war papers suggested that additional taxes should be levied on existing industries to enable the growth of industries elsewhere. In other words, Ulster was become the cash cow of a new Ireland. There was also fears that rising in taxation would also make the industries of the North East uncompetitive. On the 11th of October 1917, it was proposed that a committee of 9 be formed, of 3 nationalists, 2 independents and 3 Ulster Unionists, and a representative of the Southern Unionists, to negotiate a formula and draft proposals for an agreed system of government for the whole of Ireland. By the end of October, with the exception of fiscal powers, the subcommittee arrived at a provisional agreement on nearly every vital point, with Redmond in the belief that a final agreement was within sight. On the 7th of November, the committee, having reached an agreement on most points, Ulster delegates conferred with their advisory committee of the Ulster Unionist Council, who reported back on the 17th of November that they approved of the nominated representatives to that they disapproved of the nominated representatives to a lower house as a safeguard, whereby it was agreed that Unionists would be given a 40% of the seats in the Irish House of Commons. But they undertook to bring forward their own proposals for safeguarding Ulster's interests by means other than extra representation. At this point, a major blunder was made by the chairman, by the secretary of the convention, who instead of waiting for the Ulster Unionist proposals, diverted the discussion onto fiscal policies, where major disagreements resulted between Ulster and the Nationalists. On the 21st of November, the Committee of 9 reported to the convention that a basis for agreement had proved unsuccessful. With that, the opportunity was lost to the Ulster Unionists to fulfil their earlier undertaking to submit a scheme for the safeguarding within an Irish Parliament. With it really went any hope of an All-Ireland game. What of Sinn Féin? We've already noted that they had won a number of by-elections. George Plunkett had drawn his support from a rather eclectic mix. But after his election, he seemed to fall into the hands more of the radical Republicans rather than Griffith's end of the party. Although feuding between radicals and moderates continued, they now had a new impetus. By May, in the words of historian Michael Laffin, Sinn Féin was the fad or the craze of 1917. In the subsequent by-elections, moderates and radicals cooperated successfully, although these constitutional counters were a focus of violence. In June 1917, a police inspector in West Cork suggested that Sinn Féin is of a very undefined sort. It is anti-British, anti-recruiting, and above all, anti-Redmondite. It is a voting, shouting and marching Sinn Féin, but it is not a fighting one. This proved to be a misjudgment. On the 10th of June, the Dublin Metropolitan Police were ordered to arrest the speakers at a rally organised by Sinn Féin in central Dublin to support the remaining 120 prisoners who'd been arrested as part of the rising. While attempting to arrest Cathal Brugha and George Plunkett, this is the scene at the time in the crowd. Inspector John Mills was struck by Eamon Murray, a member of the Fianna Éireann, with a hurley stick. Moves to arrest Murray was prevented by members of the crowd, and he was eventually spirited away to America. Inspector Mills died the next day, but Murray later returned to Ireland, where he became a member of the Garda Síochána. There's certain irony in that, I have to admit. Throughout 1917, Sinn Féin continued to expand, but the release from prison of Eamon de Valera and his election as MP for Clare East provided the organisation with both a new leader and an agreement to commit itself to the aim of a republic. These elections were also successful in that they encouraged the creation of a broad spectrum among the population and a broad consensus. The Sinn Féin October Convention, for example, seemed to deliberately vague on possible contentious issues so that their hold over public opinion should not be weakened through acrimony or splitting hairs. At the convention, even Belvedere was elected president, and in his address he promised the people independence and that they could decide on their own form of government. Later, the newspaper said it heralded a new unity. And by the end of 1917, the Volunteers and Sinn Féin seemed to be unassailable. While this appears to be a settled policy, as Michael Lapham points out, after De Valera's winning it, not everybody really accepted it. De Valera and Griffith still provided two poles of a modern end of Sinn Féin and a more radical end. The one frequently stressing his republicanness, and the other never going into detail about the system of government, while the rest of Sinn Féin leaders came somewhere in between. Its success in the by-elections does not mean that Sinn Féin was universally accepted or welcomed even in nationalist circles or areas. On the 25th of June, the Unionist leading Irish Times noted that Sinn Féin demonstrations were stoned in Cork during the summer election period by a number of women and girls carrying a Union Jack. While in August it reported that in Athlone, although there were no violent disturbances, many of the inhabitants put photographs of relatives who were at war in their windows and other displays supporting them. And during the night, there was a great excitement and disturbance among the wives and mothers of large numbers of men who were at the front. It should be pointed out, of course, that Athlone and Cork had large, substantial military barracks at the time. The Cork Examiner, self-proclaimed supporter of the IPP, continually expressed opinion on the what he called the illusionary tactics employed by the Republicans to deceive the people, mocking their ideas and ridiculing their pretensions. Under strapline on the 27th of August which he called Sinn Féin, a study in illusions, it noted that President Wilson, while still neutral, pointed omitted all reference to Ireland from his small nation speech. As true had the recent papal peace note, which should have had a special significance to Catholic Ireland. While in Athlone there was no violence disturbances, the Irish Times reported that many of the inhabitants still had shown their dismay about Sinn Féin. Support, however, was slow, and was slowly turning to more Sinn Féin. In East Clare 1917, following De Valera's victory, a banner proclaimed Irish party wounded in North Ross Common, killed in South Longford and buried in East Clare. On the 30th of September, the funeral of Thomas Ashe. The funeral of Thomas Ashe, who died while on hunger strike, that brought Dublin to a standstill and attracted a crowd of over 30,000. But more importantly, in the opinion of the Daily Express, made 100,000 Sinn Féiners out of 100,000 constitutional nationalists. Let's move on briefly to look at some of the other aspects of Ireland at this time, because politics doesn't, as I say, doesn't butter any bread, and Ireland now is part of the British war effort. The war naturally brought a torrent of war and munitions contracts in Britain, but Ireland, especially outside the northeast, received very little of those. The War Office contracts that came mainly went to the textile and clothing factories in the south. The Limerick clothing factory, for example, produced uniforms for the British, Australian and later American armies. The most profitable manufacturing sector, however, was in munitions. And Ireland, with little developed industry outside the northeast, was competing for these with the industrial cities of Britain. In Limerick, the local industrial association organised the Citizens' War Committee, the first of its kind to be established in Ireland, and which entered into correspondence with the Ministry of Munitions and forwarded a list of what machinery they had available. But despite this, being asked to actually undertake small work for the Ministry of Munitions, they only received a contract of £4,000 during the whole of the war. While some suggested that it was due to lack of enterprise by local businessmen, some suspected more sinister motives. Emmett O'Connor in the Neighbour History of Ireland suggests that it was a result of Unionist and British employers determined to freeze out nationalist Ireland out of lucrative contracts, both now and after the war, and to keep Southern Ireland deindustrialised. A writer to the Limerick Leader saw it clear sinister motives at the time, suggesting that it was a good way of conscripting labour either into British factories or into the British Army. It's not surprising, therefore, that we find that by mid-1917, more than 16,000 people from the south of Ireland had moved to England to take part in war work, which of course was much better paid and very attractive to many of the workers. Although Limerick failed to get any more of the more lucrative contracts during the war, national munitions factories were set up in Dublin, Cork, Waterford and Galway. This is one of the bigger factories and one of the smaller factories, which says the men in the trenches won Irish shells. These factories employed 2,148 men and women. And as we can see, it's mostly women because they put a number, a ceiling in it, what proportion of men could work in it, men and boys. And for the first time outside the northeast, women recruited to these factories were unionised by the British-based National Federation of Women Workers. This union and its members forced Irish employers to adhere to the government regulation of a minimum wage of £1 per week for women in government-controlled employment. This was no small achievement, since under the Munition of War Act 1915, which covered all munitions and government supply factories, both public and private, strikes, lockouts and shortages were banned, and 21 days notice had to be given of any dispute. Nevertheless, it still became below the rates being paid in GB, following claims by the local Federation of Employers that because the cost of living wasn't as high in Ireland, there was no need to pay as high wages. In May 1917, however, the union secured an agreement with the ministry to place the wages of Irish women in the munitions industry on an equal footing with their British counterparts. An increase from 18 to 24 shillings per week was agreed, and from 23 shillings to 30 shillings per week for night shift workers. The Federation, of course, tried to lobby to have this reduced, but the government refused. To put it into perspective, a female worker in Dublin before the war was earning probably about 15 shillings a week, and the vast majority of labouring men were probably earning only 19 shillings a week. So this is, the opportunity to earn 30 shillings is quite a jump. Such employment was not without risk, of course. This is a private munitions work down in County in Arklow, and it had been set up in the closing years of the century on a private basis by Joseph Chamberlain's brother. And in 1917, it occurred the biggest explosion, the biggest loss of life in Irish industrial history during the war took place when 27 people were killed. During the course of the war, the number of employees grew from 600 to over 5,000 in 1917. And it even meant that people were having to be brought in by train to work at the factory. Not least of all because they were being paid £2 per week, and which for a time at least benefited the local pubs more than anybody else, and they actually had to go into restricted hours. By 1917, the Ministry of Munitions had become central to Irish working life, having the power to nationalise industries in the name of improving efficiencies. They could commandeer factories, such as breweries for chemical production. They could arbitrate in local labour disputes, such as the Dublin Steam Packet Company. They had the power to commandeer raw materials. They bought the entire wool production of Ireland in 1917. They commandeered much of the Irish merchant fleet and became the largest purchaser of Irish linen, which was used in aircraft manufacture. They also had immense powers of compulsion. They also issued licenses to allow workers to move between jobs in priority industries. Ordinary labour parties were actually resolved in the courts. However, Dublin representatives of the ministry seem to have left a lot to be desired. It wasn't until 1917 that a production depot was set up in Dublin. The idea of the production depot was to look at the quality of the goods being produced before they went to England, which obviously saved an awful lot of expense. It also gave expert advice on and assistance in contracts on what goods were to be produced. While agriculture and industries associated with the war benefited from the increased profits and wages, others such as the brewing and distilling areas suffered from wartime restrictions. In March 1917, there were rumours at the Dublin Stock Exchange that all Irish breweries were to be closed down and nationalised. And while it was believed that some would reopen under government control, they believed it was because the government wanted to regulate production and also prices. This was a further blow to the Irish industry, the brewing industry, which at the time had to reduce its production already by 40% since the beginning of the war, from 36 million to 20 million barrels per annum. Still seems an awful lot of drink to me. While output declined, the price of beer actually went up. A 2p a pint quarter before the war, it increased by 50% to 3d in December 15, and to 5d, 5 pence in 1917. Effectively, as beer got weaker, the prices still went up. Seeing I'm running a bit over time here, well, I'll skip on a bit. One of the industries that was set up in 1917 was the aircraft manufacture in Crumlin and in shipyards in Belfast, where the government actually gave contracts to Harland and Wolff to produce aircraft for them. What ain't making sense, of course, is they were using the local linen production. 1917 also saw the opening of an airfield at Aldergrove. So this year's really maybe the 100th anniversary of Aldergrove Airport, although commercial flights didn't take place until 1923. The northeast, while the south was not doing that well on a war contract, did very well, thank you. After an initial decline in output, an initial laying off of men, production had by 1917 increased to 200,000 gross tonnes of shipping, and the shipyards had access to 20,000 men employed. The flax mills had done very well, even though their main sources of flax had largely disappeared with the war. That was Belgium and Russia. But in 1917, the contracts had valued £11 million from the Ministry of Munitions. To put that into perspective, the cost of rebuilding after the Easter Rising was estimated at 2.5 million. So a very large output. It said that the Ministry of Ministry of Munitions required 50,000 miles of cloth for aircraft production. One of the things actually that many of us will be aware of is that one industry came to Ireland in 1917 and was to have an effect both on Irish industry for a much longer period, because in April 1917 Ford's opened the tractor works in Cork. Part of the Ford group has stayed in production until 1917. Just to give you some idea of the impact on agriculture, and with this I'll close. Agriculture obviously gave a great deal of scope during the period. The price of agriculture production roughly doubled during the period of the war. And even when set against increased costs of materials and labour, the Irish farmer was understandably received as one of the few beneficiaries of the conflict. The submarine menace, of course, increased the need for many of the homegrown products. One of the problems, of course, with Irish agriculture pre-war was that since the famine, tillage on the land had been greatly reduced. Farmers now concentrated on pasture land, pigs, cattle, sheep, and there wasn't such a great demand for that. What was really demanded was cereal production, and the government then encouraged them by some might say farm meetings and farm to put together a greater tillage in favour of wheat in particular. Compulsory tillage was introduced to all land above 10 acres. At one stage, during 1917, Britain was down to only 6 weeks of food left. However, with the 1917 harvest, the papers were able to acknowledge that Ireland was now producing 545,000 tonnes more than had been the output pre-war. Not everybody benefited, of course, from the increases in output from the farms. It, of course, drove the price of most commodities up. At the end of March, it was noted that the cost of living had increased by 87% since the beginning of the war. Some of the basics of the Dublin poor, just to give you an example, sugar had risen from 2.5 pence to 6 pence a pound, butter from a shilling to a shilling and sixpence, and flour increased by 20%. This, of course, led to industrial actions, including dock workers and bakers going on strike. It was said that while many in the industries did very well out of increased productivity in the war, the Dublin poor did particularly badly out of it, and as a result, many were much worse off. The church is leading a campaign suggesting that starvation was actually killing children in Dublin. I just think, it's my time's up, I think I'll stop there.